All right, good morning, Novosibirsk. It still counts as morning, I think, although it's almost lunchtime. Fantastic to see this many people. I was here last year already. I think the room was pretty full, but this one is absolutely impressive. Thanks for also inviting me back. I liked it so much last year that I actually asked Paul if I can come back. So he said, yes, of course. So here I am again. And today I'm going to talk about what you see up there. It's called Test Engineering to Engineering Productivity. And I think a much better term for what I'm trying to get across is actually how do we deal at eBay with the topic from bug detection versus bug prevention. So how do we try to move from something that we call after the fact QA, something is built and then you try to find the issues in it, to actually not having the issues happening in the first place. So that's what I'm trying to do. Fairly, new topic at eBay, so we haven't figured it out completely. So what you get today is a snapshot, just like, it's like kind of the current build of what we currently have. So just hope that I can throw out some inspirations there for everybody to see if that also fits within your organizations. Good. This is who I am. So I'm based in Zurich in Switzerland. If you look at my job title, it says productivity and test engineering. Who was here in my talk last year? Okay. Remember what it said last year? Sorry? So, yes, but my title back last year was head of quality engineering. So something changed in this last year, right? And what that is, that's what I want to talk about. This is eBay from the top, just in case you're wondering what a company like eBay looks like. No, this is in San Jose, actually, in the Silicon Valley. You may see, we don't get that much sunshine in Zurich that it's worth it to put solar panels on top of the building. So this is one of our campuses in the Silicon Valley. We're in San Jose. It's about 45 minutes south of San Francisco. And we have a few of those campuses around the world. I think we have about 90 offices all around the globe. So this is the largest one. When I say I work for eBay, most people actually, immediately. There's a red. Okay, we're back. Good. There's a red light. I don't know if that means the battery is going to run out in in 3 minutes. So that's who I work for. Okay. All right. So that's eBay Marketplaces. That's the auction site that that is known as the auction site. It's actually not an auction site anymore. It's more like a regular, like Amazon like-ish e-commerce platform. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's actually a lot of other companies in the eBay ecosystem as well, right? Like PayPal. Who has never used PayPal to pay anything? Okay, very few people. I'm sure you at some point you will you will use it. And as you can see, there's many other companies, and that's not everything. That's just also a little snapshot of the companies within eBay. And what I'm going to talk about today is what we do at eBay Marketplaces, right? Actually within the European product organization, so I can't speak for all these other companies. Good, just a few facts. Relatively, well, for the internet, old company, and on the big scale, relatively new company, founded in 1995. As I said, based in the Silicon Valley, with about 30,000 employees worldwide, including all of those other companies. eBay Marketplaces has about 100 million active buyers and sellers worldwide, so that's a very large customer base.
And we have about 2,500 US dollars transaction volume every single second, which means that the value of the goods that's transacted over the site is about 2,500 US dollars every single second. A little bit more than half of that is actually transacted in Europe or in eBay International, so which falls under our jurisdiction. 2 billion page views every day, so quite a bit of load hitting us, 75 billion database calls. Mobile is a huge, huge topic. Some countries actually report almost half of their traffic and revenue coming from mobile. So very, very big topic. Also from a testing perspective, of course, quite a challenging thing. Good. Now, let's get to the chase. Little exercise. So if your job description, or if you do anything testing related, raise your hands. Okay? That's a lot of people, but not everybody, which is interesting. Okay? I would have expected that there's a lot of people since this is the QA track, so absolutely, you're in the right room. Developers. Anybody? Aha, wonderful. Now, this is very rare, actually. I speak at quite a few conferences. And usually when I ask this question, it's actually very rare that any hands actually go up, because there's test conferences out there. And, you know, Swiss testing day, German testing nights, and, you know, stuff like that, which is very, very testing oriented. But you actually never get developers and testers into one room. So that's quite fascinating. Any product managers here? Product owners? Designers? Okay, cool, very nice. Now, that's really nice, because as I said, I think this is one of the few conferences where it actually comes all together, and just looking at the program, you also have tracks for product management tomorrow, and I think requirements, something, I saw something about requirements. And that's absolutely the right way to go, I think. Also from how you do your job and how you think in your job, that's the way to go forward. I spoke at a test conference in Germany, and it was called German Testing Day. And they had a very nice, I asked the same question, only testers put up their hands. But it actually had a very nice title. It says, you know, requirements, development, testing, quality is only built together, right? And I think that's the whole point. Good. Now, we'll turn to the person to your right, and quickly just say hello and introduce yourself, if you don't know them already. Now, so I stole this little sequence here. I was in Australia last year in October, spoke at a conference, and there was a guy called Brett Rogers from JP Morgan. He's the global test head of JP Morgan. He did the keynote, and he did exactly this. He went up there, and this was the first thing he said. He's like, shake hands, right? So people did that. Second thing he said was, well, I got bad news for you, because I think that about half the people in this room won't have a job in 3 to 5 years. It was a test conference, so huge, like, whoa, crazy. How can he say that? You know, keynote speaker. How can he make such a bold statement? And I think he said something that a lot of people are thinking, and myself as well. If we look at how product is built today versus 5 years ago, you know, or 10 years ago, tools have become much, much better. Iterations have become much, much shorter. So you test in a very different way. Before you had this whole, well, let's build something and then let's test it, right? Now it's let's test it while we build it, or maybe even let's test it, try and test it first, if you're following like a TDD approach, for example, right? Something like that. So that kind of raises the question, do we, you know, where's the place of the old style tester? So he raised a few he made people raise a few eyebrows there. When you look at companies like Google or Facebook, people aren't called test engineers, I think they're called software development engineer in test or something like that. Facebook, I think, doesn't have testers at all, or they claim not to have them at all, right? So it's an interesting trend, and I think why it hasn't swept into every single company is because the fact that in a lot of companies there's still a big division between QA and development, particularly, right? And because a lot of companies haven't really gone down this true agile path of bringing teams together and having them work together. Good. So also, I found this just a couple of weeks ago. This is Star Canada. It's one of the conferences around QA. And so I hope everybody can see that. It says, we're moving to Agile. What are our testers going to do? Right, and I think that's one of the biggest questions. And that's also one of the questions that we at eBay went through. When we went Agile, we claimed to be Agile for a very long time, but I think we've actually only been Agile for a very short period of time. And as we were going Agile, I think this question comes up: what are our testers going to do? How are they going to work? Right? And so this is a huge topic, and I'm sure who works or who doesn't work in an Agile environment in here? Okay, so everybody else thinks they work in an Agile environment, or or their managers tell them that they are. Good. So this is kind of at the center of everything, right? How do you test in this new world of building products, in this new world of testing? And I think to understand what we're doing at eBay, it's important to take a look back. And when we look back how we worked, and how we maybe still work in some pockets of the company, I would say it was very, very manual work, right? Very untechnical type of testing. It was really, something was built and then it was thrown over the fence and then people started testing it. And they were very happy when they found bugs, which is always sounded weird to me, even though my job was kind of, to run a team that found the bugs. I always thought it's weird that we celebrate the fact that we find bugs. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Right? So very, very untechnical type of work, and lots of what we call secondary artifacts, meaning writing test plans, doing test case reviews, having like big Excel sheets of these test cases that had to be executed, and then you go through it and then you check it off, and then you feel good about it because you think you tested everything, and then you find out later in production that, well, maybe you missed a few things. So that's kind of how we worked. And as I said, the thing is, it was different goals for development and testers. Developers are kind of measured by the fact how few bugs they introduce or how few bugs they write, and testers are kind of rewarded for the fact that they find a lot of bugs. So that in itself is a bit of a problem, I would say. Right? So you have these two groups, and they have distinctly different goals. So now, also when we look at Agile, this is how a waterfall model looked like, right? So you had, it was 6 months or 9 months, doesn't matter. You had a development phase, and then you had a testing phase. And if your cycle was 6 months, you probably developed for 4.5 months, and then you tested for 1.5 months, and that was how your product was pushed out there. Well, now, if you're honest, then something like Agile came along, you have a 2-week sprint all of a sudden, and boo-hoo, it looks exactly the same, right? So who in this Agile, those people who are Agile, does the sprint look anything like this? Yeah. Okay. So again, right, it's just a little waterfall, and you just call it sprint, and it's now 2 weeks instead of 6 months. Right? But that's nothing really has changed in terms of how you test. You may test smaller things, but you don't. You still test after the fact, after that little product that you want to push out has been built. Now this. So this is when I look at my group that was looking after hunting bugs. Yeah, that's what they did. They were rewarded for finding bugs. That was their job description, right? When we hired new people, they introduced themselves as bug hunters. Right? I saw there's a lady down there. You have a Q. What does it say on the back of your shirt? It says, I just caught that. It says Bug QA Master, glamorous Bug QA Master. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying it was very much focusing on finding bugs and not even remotely trying to prevent them in the first place. Our product managers discovered bug bashes, what they call bug bashes. They went out after the product has been released to production. They went out and organized, 100 people, and then they were bashing the bugs out of the product. But the problem was our 100 million customers were seeing those same issues as well, right? So fundamentally, I think something wrong there. And so that, all that kind of got me thinking. I've been actually with eBay for 10 years, so I've lived this culture myself, and I'm probably part of this culture myself, and it's also part of my fault that it was like that at eBay. But, at some point, it's good when you start changing, and at some point I started thinking about this, that this is maybe not the right approach. Right? So we tried and changed things. Also, maybe one word about automation. Who has no automation in their company? Okay, a few, but I would say 99.5% has some kind of automation. It's interesting because automation, I would say, failed in probably just as many companies as have raised their hands now. And why I think that is, by the way, if you Google me or if you Bing me, to be politically correct, you probably see a lot of my talks are actually about test automation. So I'm a huge fan of test automation, but I would still say that in many places it failed because it was completely decoupled from development, right? Test automation, especially the end-to-end part of it, was part of the testers, and the testers had to do that with tools that developers would have not even touched with a very long pole, right? So I think it was kind of doomed from the very beginning to separate test automation. I actually remember about 5 or 6 years ago at eBay, somebody, not me, had the glorious idea that unit testing needs to be done by the QA people. That was the big thing, and everybody was kind of believing in it. And I thought that was the weirdest thing that I've ever heard, actually. Right? So again, the separation of automation in the end, and I think that's why it really failed. It was never in sync with what was happening on the development side. Good. So what I said is kind of like I regard that as the past at eBay. But I think, for in parts of eBay, but probably also out there in the world, this is still kind of the reality of many companies today. Yeah. Now let's look at what we changed, what we're trying to change as we go along. I said it's really about preventing bugs rather than detecting bugs in the first place. And now that sounds like you need some kind of magic formula for that. But you actually don't. So what we're doing is really not rocket science, and companies have done it before us. Where I just got lucky to get here and get the opportunity to talk about it. Yeah. So how can you prevent bugs? And what we did is, well, this is also why my title changed, is we renamed the team into Productivity and Test Engineering. Yeah. So we took the quality aspect out of it. I had to fight many fights with my managers that are running the teams to agree on this name. We had offsites just to come up with this name. But I really wanted to get the name the quality aspect out of our team, right? So also to get away from this. Well, those are the quality guys, and they are responsible for testing, because that's not how I see it. And what our charter is actually not really the testing part anymore, but actually making the teams that we work within, so our Scrum teams or our ecosystem, actually make them more efficient and more productive, and thereby trying to prevent bugs from happening in the first place, giving them the right tools, supplying them with proper build chains and automation systems, etc., and actually, giving them much more better tools in order to do their job in a more efficient way. Right. So that's one aspect. So that said, the focus is on the productivity side and not so much on the finding the bugs piece. Now, how do we do this? And this is a very simplistic view but actually it's probably not much more complicated than this. So if you look at it, we have 3 teams. Well, we have more teams, but let's just pick these 3 teams that we have. And then there's this vertical layer that goes into every team. And then there's a horizontal layer that we put across these teams. Right? And that's really it. That's the magic recipe that we have. Now, the horizontal piece, so the thing that goes across, is kind of composed of a lot of consulting work also. When it comes to test-driven development, working with the developers on how can you write good automated tests. So a lot of developers are really good at it, but some need some help, especially in the end-to-end space. I find a lot of developers are really good at unit testing, but as you move up the stack, it becomes a little bit thinner in terms of how they do it. So, for example, test-driven development, automation in general, providing, for example, a unified Selenium Grid for all the teams, rather than having 15 Selenium Grids set up for each team. Actually working on having one, right? Maybe integrating mobile into that, right? Because there's also mobile development, for example. Just giving advice, working on the architecture across the board and on the infrastructure, right? I think that's really what's happening there. So a lot of technical work that's going on, and a lot of advisory and consulting type work. Not so much testing as we know it, I would say. Then there is this vertical support, so that's the stuff that goes into the teams and actually intersects with that horizontal layer, right? And that's things like exploratory testing. If we kind of follow this rapid testing approach where we don't try to write all these test cases and deck everything out ahead of time, but actually go in, explore the product and try to find issues that way. Focus is always on fast feedback, right? So get rid of all the unnecessary documentation. There is, of course, necessary documentation as well, but get rid of the unnecessary stuff. Manual testing. So as much as we love to automate, I think manual testing still has a big place, right? But maybe not the same place as it had before, yeah? Or maybe not on the same scale as it had before automation came along. Focus on primary work artifacts, so which means testing, right? Actually doing the work rather than writing some 100-page documentation. And what I find is very important is domain knowledge. So providing the domain knowledge to the teams. I find that testers usually have the best overview about the product that you are actually building, and therefore the knowledge that testers can provide to the team about, well, if you change something here, it actually may impact somebody else's product over there. That's very, very valuable, right? So again, a lot of kind of consulting type of work. So that's really it. So this is not magic, right? And this may sound very high level now, but it's kind of what we've introduced and what we're trying to constantly do better. Now the question is, of course, well, do we then still need testers? Is eBay hiring testers? Would I say we don't need testers at all anymore going forward? Or is it just enough if we have developers? Well, there's different views on that. And just to bring back one of the pictures that I showed already last year, and because I live in Switzerland, I would say this is what we need. Right? This is actually what I showed last year, and not knowing that we're going to go down this route, right? But back then I already said this is the type of people that we need. So we don't just need this one type of person. We actually need somebody who can, who can't just open up the wine bottle with the corkscrew, but actually, maybe do some other work as well, like system administration, writing code. I mean, there's no reason why what we're seeing today is that actually some of our embedded testers, how we call them, actually are moving into writing production code together with the rest of the team. Right? So no reason you shouldn't do that, right? But you have to have the capability and the knowledge to do that in the first place. So these are the type of people that we're looking for going forward. Yeah. Which means that, especially when I go to test conferences, that's a very tough message for some people, right? Especially when when you don't have that. But really, I mean, also, places like this and presentations like this are meant to inspire. So the one inspiration that I'd like you to take away is get more technical if you aren't today, right? I think, and especially in the part of the world that I live, usually testers are not very technical at all, right? So that's always my message: become a lot more technical and add to that skill set that's out there. Good. So I have a few more minutes left, so I just want to quickly say something on on management, or on test management, how we call it. So you probably all at some point have to measure things, right? You have to measure how many bugs you find, you have to measure how many lines of code you write, you measure complexity of your software, unit test coverage, and things like that, right? And we kind of have to do that too. And people are getting really hooked on numbers. So last time I was in the US, I saw this big presentation and said, we have to have 80% unit test coverage, right? And so I'm like, all right, that's good, but why? Oh, because it's good, right? So I actually think I found why people have this magic 80%, because it's actually, I was playing around with the Jenkins plugin the other day for Cobertura, for the code coverage tool, and it has some presets, it has some default values when it should mark the build as unstable, and that's set to 80%. So it comes out of the package, right? And I'm like, all right, well, but why 80%? Right? And I think a lot of organizations really get hooked on these numbers. That we had a bug submission goal. When I started at eBay, we had a bug submission goal of 15 bugs per week. So as a tester, you were supposed to find at least 15 bugs per week. Well, that's not a problem usually, right? To do that, but is it the right bugs, right? Or same thing, do you invest in code, in pushing up that code coverage just to reach that 80% number, or is it to actually exercise the right piece of code, right? Those are the things. And so how I look at these things is, you should really try and and yes, use numbers, but more for informational purposes, not to set a hard line there that yes, this is passed or this is failed, but actually try to use it as an information. Tools like Sonar, for example, provide you a ton of information. Use it, but more for an informational purpose. And also look at trends rather than saying, we reached X% and that's why we're good and that's why we can release. I found this tweet from Michael Bolton a while ago, right? And I think this is it, right? A lot of organizations are obsessed with this hitting some numbers rather than, and then they're doing everything to hit those numbers and forgetting about actually why they're doing it in the first place. Okie doke. So one last word, I think I have 30 seconds left, so I may go a bit over time. Open source. This is also just, not really related to this productivity and test engineering thing, but it is in the end. Open source is often used because it's free. Is that, and that's a very good reason, but I think that's not the best reason to use open source software in your organization. Actually, what I find is actually more important is because you as an organization have much faster innovation cycles. There's a gentleman sitting here in the front, it's Dominic Dari, and he works in my team, and he's the guy who actually wrote Selendroid. Selendroid is the Selenium implementation for automated Android testing. So you can use the Selenium protocol to run Android tests on devices and on emulators. That has helped us massively inside of eBay, right? To tackle that space in the first place, because there was nothing out there that could do that. But then now companies like Facebook also discovered it, and they're like, this is actually pretty cool. So we're using that, right? Same thing. If you remember last year, I had a gentleman here with a long beard and long hair, François Renaud, and he was writing the opposite. He was writing the iOS driver, right? Same thing. Also, Selenium Grid, I saw there's a talk about Selenium Grid, the OK version. I'm still very curious what that means. Selenium Grid actually came also out of our team in Europe, right? So that's why I'm a huge fan of open source software, not just to use it, but also actually to actively contribute it to it and push it out there for others to use. Gives you independence, and also for your people, it gives you engagement and opportunities to grow. People come to us because they can work on open source, right? And that in itself, helps this whole thing about getting more productive, getting really good people. Productivity comes usually with having good people on board in the first place. And then you can hire them much easier because you can say, hey, you can actually work on very, very cool stuff here. Good. So, what's the big goal? The big goal, in the end, is to put quality into the DNA of every single team, rather than have things separated, with development, QA, etc. Actually, it needs to go into absolutely every single person's head, regardless in what kind of function you are working. Yeah. I think it's absolutely doable in every company. I often hear, well, you can do that because you're eBay and you're Silicon Valley. And no. I think it can be absolutely done in every single company. It just means that you need to want it. One interesting thing that I said 6 months ago when I spoke about this topic when we just started, one interesting thing was I said, I think my job is going to be gone in about a year's time. So that was 6 months ago. And I would say I'm on a very, very good track on achieving that my job is no longer needed in the same way as it was before, right? And I think in order to push changes like this, it oftentimes takes also management support, right? Managers to stand above things and say, okay, I'm actually, maybe I'm no longer needed after I go through this transition. And I think a lot of companies don't go through these kind of transitions because the managers are afraid to, that something may change for them. But I'm always saying, well, if the job like I have it today doesn't exist anymore, then there's going to be something else, right? And something probably even more exciting than what I'm doing today, right? And I think that's also what it takes, not just from an individual engineering perspective, but also just from a manager. So if there's any managers in here, please keep that in mind. Otherwise, if there's any managers in here? Oh, okay, well, there you go. Take it home with you. And for everybody else, tell your manager to kind of, open up their minds and be ready for change. Good. So with that, spasiba. Thank you very much.
Team, I'm working for biggest Russian e-commerce, La Moda, from Moscow, and First of all, I should thank you for such an inspirational talk. But what happens to quality? You you said you get rid of the quality, and that makes me really upset because you can deliver a brilliant builds free of bugs, which is still sucks. Because it lacks of some kind of quality in not in a technical way. And we have a proverb in Russian: if uh, everybody owns it, nobody owns it. Who owns equality in your case?
So the team owns quality, right? And that may sound very fluffy, uh, but when you look at how agile is defined, that's how it is. Everybody owns quality. And I mean, I'm not talking about a team of 100 people. I mean, usually Scrum teams are 5, 6, 7 people, right? So I think it still may be that there's this embedded test engineer, who wears that testing hat. But it's not just up to that person to actually think about quality. What happened, or what is happening oftentimes, is that a developer, because they are so much focusing on writing code and delivering stories and whatever you call it, that they don't really care whether it's working properly or not, right? They just say, oh, well, I wrote the code, and you tester, you go and you find it. And that's what we want to get away from, right? And that's exactly that's a tough step. And I'm finding that within our group in Europe, it actually works quite well. But in other locations at eBay, it's a tough thing to push through, because there's still this thinking, there's still this barrier up in people's mind that, well, I'm the developer and I don't test, versus the tester is like, well, I don't code, right? And yeah, but so you're talking about more the user experience part, or?
All right, good morning, Novosibirsk. It still counts as morning, I think, although it's almost lunchtime. Fantastic to see this many people. I was here last year already. I think the room was pretty full, but this one is absolutely impressive. Thanks for also inviting me back. I liked it so much last year that I actually asked Paul if I can come back. So he said, yes, of course. So here I am again. And today I'm going to talk about what you see up there. It's called Test Engineering to Engineering Productivity. And I think a much better term for what I'm trying to get across is actually, how do we deal at eBay with the topic from bug detection versus bug prevention? So how do we try to move from something that we call after the fact QA, something is built and then you try to find the issues in it, to actually not having the issues happening in the first place. So that's what I'm trying to do. Fairly, new topic at eBay, so we haven't figured it out completely. So what you get today is a snapshot. Just like, it's like kind of the current build of what we currently have. Yeah, so just hope that I can throw out some inspirations there for everybody to see if that also fits within your organizations. Good. This is who I am. So I'm based in Zurich in Switzerland. If you look at my job title, it says productivity and test engineering. Who was here in my talk last year? Okay. Remember what it said?